Okay, so I know that this is not our textbook that we're using for this semester, but there are some things in a couple of these chapters that I really wanted to go over with you guys, so we have a little bit of a foundational background based on digital media. Okay. So when I was looking at content today, let me just kind of make this full screen. There are a lot of things to think about in terms of understanding where we started and how we got to where we are. Okay. So the actual definition of multimedia is contemporary multimedia is the development of integration. What does it mean to integrate? Put it together. Okay. Integration and delivery. So if you're getting it on the computer, of any combination of text, graphic, animation, sound, or video through a digital processing device, right? So when you're doing games or you're on social media or whatever, that's all considered part of contemporary multimedia. Can you think of any instances in the past whereby a communication tool was used that maybe was not digital? So digital, you know what digital is, right? Okay. Can you think of some tool that people used many years ago that to communicate, okay, send a message, whatever, but it wasn't digital? Okay, letters. So we go all the way back to like paintings or carvings, rock carvings, right? Okay. What about after that? Let's come forward a bit. Telegram or telegraph. You know what the telegraph is? What's a telegraph? Is it something you hear?
Yeah.
Okay. So the very first telegraph invention was basically you had somebody that would sit in one location and they had a little device that had a little, it was almost like a little pecker kind of thing. And they would hold it down for dashes, right? Or they do it real quick for a dot. Right? And then somebody somewhere else would receive that same message. It would come back and there would be, it was almost like a decoder. So you had your encoder, the sender, right? They'd send it along this little wire, this current, and then it would pop up over to different location and decode it. Same thing. Right? Okay. And they would take those series of dashes and dots and assign letter values to them, like A, B, C. You've probably heard of SOS. You know the signal SOS?
Oh, maybe we've got some dashes to SOS.
SOS. S O S. It's 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots. Okay. So that's the way one of the forms of early communication is set out. Okay. And then we've progressed a whole lot since then. So even before that, we had the printing press, and that was a revolution in itself. And then we moved forward into the telegraph and transmitting things electronically. And originally, it had to be done like with an electrical line, you know, like we have power lines and things that use an actual line, point to point. And then the discovery was made that you could actually use some sort of electronic wave that could be picked up by like an antenna. Right? Have your parents ever talked about like old-timey TV systems, how that worked? Years ago, they had antennas. If you guys ever seen like old antennas on the top of buildings and stuff, and like when I was growing up, we had cable, you know, with the coax that came out of the wall, but you could also put your bunny ears up on your TV and you could like catch the signal coming in. And you might catch like WCYB and it'd be sort of snowy or whatever, but you could dial it in a little bit and tweak your set before you could get it in as clear as you want. And of course, it started out being broadcast in black and white, not in color. And that was kind of cool. And I can remember getting nostalgic here. I can remember, I thought when Nickelodeon came on, that was like the coolest channel ever because they never had a programming channel that was specifically for kids, except for Saturday morning cartoons. So I was really excited when Nickelodeon. But anyway, so in terms of forms of multimedia, we touched on this just basically the other day. There's a difference between interactive and non-interactive. So non-interactive, it means we're getting content, but we're just an observer. So what would be an example of that? What kind of media do you get that you're just an observer?
Like the news, we just,
Okay, or a kiosk or a monitor, right?
thinking more like actually that she will not be on the screen.
Okay.
Let's say TikTok.
Well, I think about, okay, so like we got these monitors all the way across campus, right? You guys see them with our events and stuff. You see it, but you interact with it. You just read it and you're like, oh, okay, I'm not going for that. Thanks, anyway. So that's more non-interactive. So interactive is,
One that you actually participate on this.
STEAM,
Sting?
STEAM, is that interactive?
Oh, yeah.
All social media, yeah, unless you're just looking,
Facebook, Twitter.
yeah, yeah. TikTok, all that good stuff. So kiosk, that's kind of like what we were just talking about, digital animations. Have you guys like ever worked with animation at all? We need to see if we can get you guys to, and well, let me back up. Have you ever gone to a website and you'll see little things moving around and it's all animated and stuff? I'd like to get you guys into learning how that works because it's really cool. It's not as difficult as you would think. There's a program that's called Adobe Animate. And like you can take, I mean, anything, you can take, like if you want to cut out a creature, you could take this creature, make him walk across and go camping and pitch a tent, and build a fire. And
I have done something like that. I forget what it was called. My friend Will, he's in, he had like a double major.
yeah.
He's already out of college where he has a job. He went to the army too.
Mhm.
And he used to make games. And he showed me how to do one of those like little characters you put on your screen.
Yeah.
They would like bounce around and do stuff. And I know that sometimes you can make them interactive, so they can
Yeah.
like pull up pages or something like that. I'm doing that. It was really cool.
Yeah.
To go back and just down for. I have no idea how to do it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. It's interesting. You said the name Will and military. How old is he? Is he in his 20s?
Yeah, I think he's past his 20s.
Oh, he's
his
in
30s.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I was gonna say, sounded like somebody I know.
He's called Will Bledsoe.
Oh, Bill Bledsoe's son.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's, I think he's in the state, I'm not sure.
yeah.
But he's the one who,
Yeah, Will's done some really cool stuff. He was in a video class I did. And he did an amazing documentary. He like went and followed this guy around that had, he was an electrician. And he like documented a day in the life of this electrician. And it was really cool. I mean, he did a wonderful job. He's very smart in there.
yeah, he did a volcano class.
Yeah,
At least Bill said he got like A's in everything.
yeah.
Except for one volcano class that he got C because, teacher didn't like him.
I don't know.
Bill said he did everything right, but the teacher just went to the that's stuff.
That's not good.
I have no idea what this tutorial.
Yeah,
What happened. But I know Will's very smart.
he is very smart and he's very visual. He's very good at like visual stuff. You'll probably meet him because he pops in every little bit, every now and then. He'll come in to see his dad or help him move some stuff. But he's fun. He's a real nice person.
Yeah, Will's younger brother,
Uh-huh.
Grayson,
Yeah.
and my brother, my older brother, is very good for me.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
So that's how I know Bill. That's how I know Will.
Yeah.
'Cause my
Does he make you call him Bill in class?
Bill, he's,
Or Mr. Bledsoe?
everybody tells me to call him Mr. Bledsoe. I'm
Yeah.
really used to calling him just, hey Bledsoe, or hey Bill.
Yeah,
Because I went to his house before to meet Will and hang out with
Yeah.
Grayson and my brother.
right. Right. Fun times. All right. Yeah, they're very talented. All right, interactive multimedia. You have basic interactivity. You have 3 levels. So basic is like a button. You click a button, right? Adaptive means that the information adapts to the actions that somebody does. And then you have immersive. So what would be an example of that? To be immersed in media.
Like VR.
Absolutely. Yep. VR, virtual reality, augmented reality, which is really cool. I would love to. Do you guys know about NFTs?
NFT.
Yeah. What do you think about
What's the matter?
it? A lot of people making a lot of money. I think it's such an early stage in NFTs. I don't know. My thing is, okay, so you buy the rights to whatever image that's been created. How do you keep people from just duplicating
Really?
that? I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing is you get this how do I say it? Authenticating signature that's within the code, right? But let's say I don't care about that. I just want to put it on a monitor and hang it on a wall in my, my home to display. What's to keep me from just copying it and using it? I haven't figured it out yet. I'm still trying to.
There's only one NFT type, and it was like the earliest of NFTs. It was like those monkeys.
Yeah, I remember
Those,
those.
if you buy one, you actually own an invitation to like a yearly yacht trip.
Yeah,
It was-
yeah, I know. I know.
But when you buy it, you get like animations for it, like they do certain things. I know
Right.
that because someone showed it off. And you just get an invitation to this yacht from this really rich dude. Probably
Yeah.
has all the NFTs he sold.
What were those called? Something monkey. It wasn't Dirty Monkey. It was some weird name. What was it called? I can't remember what they were called, but it was a real unusual, not spoiled monkey. But there were a bunch of them. And I know they started out inexpensive and then they got real expensive really fast. And then I heard people were frustrated because they had like plummeted in their value. And they went from like, the one was like $1.3 million and it had dropped down to like 20,000. If I'd have spent all that money, I would be mad as Hades. But I'll show you as we go later on. There's a documentary that on NFTs that I like to show students, and it's at a museum in Miami. And it really breaks down and shows that a whole side of that world that people don't even necessarily know about or are aware of. And you have all these artists at this interactive museum, and they're all talking about how they created it and, why they created it and what they expect out of it. And there was one piece in there, and I can't remember if it was like an abstract piece, kind of, it had like circles and rings in it. And it would just move around. I mean, it was very organic. But I mean, it went with like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I was just totally blown away. I can, you know,
I've seen them make, I've seen them make a bunch of circles now.
yeah.
Yeah, easy money right there.
I mean, seriously, you know. But,
I think most art pieces stuff are so much, because they have a certain name behind it. There's no way that people are buying art pieces that are just literally just someone did paint on it.
yeah.
There's no way.
And the interesting thing, I work on the side for a nonprofit, and the CEO of our nonprofit has decided he wants to dabble in NFTs a little bit. So I have to go up and do some photography to create NFTs out of. And it's bizarre to me because I don't know what to expect, you know, to be able to do this. And he's got, there's an individual he's working with that he's made a couple of $1 million off of selling NFTs, buying and selling. So he's encouraging, you know, this nonprofit to do something and submit maybe 4 or 5 NFTs out there for circulation. So we'll see. I'll keep you guys posted if it's good or not. I'm not holding my breath. But, yeah. All right, so there's this thing called analog. Have you guys ever heard of analog?
That's, I know it is. You speak
Okay,
and it does it, I like.
so analog is different from digital because analog is not digital. Okay, analog is electrical. Or it can be sound like sound waves
Yeah,
that are converted to an electrical signal that are mixed and then come back out and reverse the process into a speaker. So like you have a microphone takes a sound wave, converts it into an electrical duplicate, runs it down the cable into your mixer, you process it, do whatever, like on your computer digitally. And then when you go to put it back out to a speaker so you can hear it, it's reversing that process and taking that digital signal and turning it back into an analog signal to work with the speaker out there. Okay. So analog is more electrical to me in nature, right? It's like old school stuff. It's not digital at all. And digital, digital is basically you have ones and zeros that represent whatever the wave is, the sound wave, versus using the electrical signal to replicate the sound. Does that make sense? Okay. So if somebody says analog versus digital, analog is, anything really for replication that digital is not. When it comes to audio, video. Okay. Good. Okay, good. All right, so just a little bit on the history. Vannevar Bush came up with a concept, and I want you guys to go ahead and look this up on the computer. Memex1, and it'll pull up images, and you guys can see an image of his concept. He came up with a concept to be able to take data and put it into a machine, right? Is your machine working?
No, can I just use my laptop?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. You can do that anytime in class.
then that's one.
MEMEX1 and hit images. And it should pull up some like drawings, some concepts.
Just time machine.
Well, no, it's not a time machine, but there may be one image, especially if you type in this as we may think with Memex. And the guy has a Cyclops. It's like a little camera right here on his forehead strapped to the Cyclops camera.
I got a lot of time. So. Like watches.
No, now it's not Memex. Type in Memex1 and then put in Vannevar or Bush, either way. That's it right there, actually. That's it.
That,
That's it.
oh,
Yeah, that's the concept. Yep, you got it. You got it. That is a concept that Vannevar Bush came out with, and it was a machine to be able to help scientists record work and sort through things, like that. He had a really good idea, but it really just never made it to fruition like he was hoping for. And then he came out with the second one. What he wanted it to do was he wanted it to have storage, because scientists, they create a lot of data, right? If you are sitting in a class and you're doing research, you can make a lot of data. Now he wanted a way to store it and exchange it. And it's funny because they have the vocoder versus an encoder. And it had automatic mathematical calculations and reasoning, and new methods to store and access that data. So he had this great idea. He thought it would help people do things and preserve their data, but it wasn't quite where he wanted it to be. So then in 1959, he came up with a little new and improved version of it, of his concept, in that this time he wanted to use magnetic tape. What's an example of magnetic tape? You guys have probably seen. You probably actually seen it. When you did it. Yeah, VHS, that's magnetic tape. How does it work? How does that tape work?
It's like on
Let me give you a hint. If it's magnetic, what's it do? This is my tape. What's it do? How does it create pictures? It has magnetic, because it's magnetic, it attracts particles to it, right? It sticks to the tape.
so like certain parts of it is magnetic.
Well, like all of your tape is magnetic. And it has little particles that adhere to it that are interpreted to create an image. For like your video. And then as it plays through and those images are read, then it takes that signal and converts it into electrical energy that in turn is projected with light onto your screen and your video. So you get to see the video.
Interesting. All it is, some kind of tape thing on it.
Yeah, it is
And
tape. It is tape, but
go
it's
around-
magnetic tape.
go
That's,
around and around
but you
and
can't
around.
stick it. It's not adhesive tape, right? You can't stick it, but it's magnetic. It pulls particles into the tape to help create a foundation for a signal to be read to ultimately induce, create video.
And all I remember is VHS were terrible at trying to put that together.
Yeah, they're not fun. Or if it got ate by like the VHS player,
Yeah.
and you pull it out and it'd be all wrinkled and stuff, and then when you put it back in after you rolled it back up, you'd see like ripping and tearing in the image. You know what I'm talking about? It'd be like all whatever. And that's because you damaged the layering of those magnetic particles on that tape with the creases and bends and trashiness. So with Memex2, then he added a transistor. You guys have probably heard of transistor radios, right? Little tiny circuitry. And then he also wanted to add a digital computer, but it's a very primitive digital computer. So the goal for this was to be able to have databases shared. So I could take that tape and put it in another machine and somebody else could look at it and read it. Or if I wanted to send my tape and mail it to wherever, they could read it, right? And just put it in their machine. And he had this term, it was called trails. And that's a real important term for what he had. But they were color coded to be able to reflect the age and reinforced by repetitive use. So basically, combined with the computer, he believed with his concept that he could create, a very good experience for data scientists to be able to share information. So The next guy, Alan Turing, he created what was called the Turing machine. And it was a way to actually create procedures to be able to share data. And his device and his concept, it had these really big long pieces of tape. Go ahead and look this up. Find images of the Turing machine. You'll see what I'm talking about. It has big reels of tape that they would go through and play, and it would record to the tapes, and then you could go back and play it back. Not audio. We're not talking about audio, strictly data. It had like a head that would read and write at one side, and then it had a decoder on the other. And he included a set of instructions with it. He felt like would absolutely be necessary. Have you got it pulled up? It's kind of weird, like to look at it. It's like just it looks like two big long spools of tape, you know. So
Should we-
yeah. So his single purpose, he had two different machines here that he looked at doing. So he had a single purpose Turing machine to carry out specific procedures. And then there was the universal Turing machine that could accept single purpose, but it could also imitate behavior. Which is interesting. Next up, Douglas Engelbart. He really was into practical applications of computers beyond just mathematics and science. And he was into really trying to make it for human/computer interactivity. He was more concerned going outside of the realm of just having records of data. He wanted it to actually interact with people. And he's responsible for these things. You've heard of a mouse. He's responsible for the mouse, multiple screen areas for text editing, and when you guys use now, email. So if I were going to give a quiz, that would be a great question. If I said, who's responsible for the mouse and email? Right? You would know who that is. It's Douglas Engelbart. Theodore Nelson, he came up with hypertext and hypermedia. And I'll put this up so you guys can see it on Canvas, because part of this is fair game for quiz content, but I'll put it up there. And all my quizzes, I don't know if I told you guys this, all my quizzes are all open everything. Open book, open text, open note. Because if you don't know it, and you have to go look for it, chances are after you have to go look for it, you'll remember it. That's the method to my madness. So what's the difference between hypertext and hypermedia? Hypertext is what? You know, yeah, okay. Interactive text. It's linked to other text information. Hypermedia links to, right. And he came up with an idea for what's called the Xanadu project. And the Xanadu project was really a hypertext library whereby anybody in the world could access it. So if you think about, if you put it in perspective and you think about like a worldwide library, almost like Wikipedia kind of sort of, okay? But not Wikipedia, but kind of early thought stages behind something like that. Okay? And think about this, because you guys have all been on Wikipedia, right? Wikipedia allows people to do what? Edit. It allows people to do what? It shows versions, right, of posts. Crediting, yeah. And rewarding contributors. So-and-so contributed this. So if you go on Wikipedia, you know how like at the very bottom of any post, it's like, you'll see references and resources and all this other stuff, other pages, and they're all cross-referenced. So the thought came out a really long time ago, way before Wikipedia. Somebody else just said, oh, let's take this idea and make it bigger and better. Alan Kay, he proposed a computer design that change the way people have perceptions created, the way they learn and how they create. And his thing was what's called the Donna book. And it was very similar to personal computer, that's what you guys have. Okay, way before Steve Jobs. Long, long time ago. And then he also introduced what's called the graphical user interface, or GUI. Know who that is, right? What did he do?
He ate an apple.
Yeah, he ate an apple, all right. And then he made many, many more. So,
He ate the apple.
and it floors me because the first Apple I ever bought, I bought a Mac LC. And this was in 1988. And it was a little black and white monitor, and it had a detached base that had your computer in it, and it took those 3.5-inch floppies you put in it. And it had like 64 gig of RAM in the whole computer. And I paid $3,000 for it in college. And you talk about depressing. Because I put it in the yard sale and sold it for $25. But you got to remember that was such a long time ago. And back then, that's the way we would lay out like the yearbook. I was at ETSU and we'd lay out the yearbook using the Mac LC. We use this old program called PageMaker. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. But we lay it out, and then same thing with like the school newspaper. And it was all, you could put in like some black and white pictures. But pictures just would slow down your whole computer drastically because it just couldn't hardly handle, too much. You didn't have the amount of resolutions and things like you have now, even just on your phone. All right. Tim Berners-Lee, he had a decentralized information system consisting of nodes. So that's the big thing that he's remembered for, is nodes. And nodes basically could represent any kind of media or text. It could be video, audio, it could be interactive, and anyone could add them. And there was no centralized control over servers or anything. And that kind of puts me in the mind of, so like if you wanted to go and search the dark web or the deep web, you guys know what that is, right? Okay. What do they usually do to cover their tracks so you can't actually have, like, so you would have a hard time tracking down someone's website? You could view it, but pieces all came from different computers. You know what I'm talking about? My brain just stopped. Torrent. You know what torrent is? So back about 10, 15 years ago, about 15 years ago, you had websites that had a whole lot of illegal activity going on. For example, there was a website that was called the Silk Road. You know that? Well, Silk Road was an underground website that they would sell firearms, they would sell drugs, they would do human trafficking, they had assassins for hire, any illegal activity that, was out there, you could buy, sell, whatever on the black market on this site called the Silk Road. But they were especially known for drugs. And they found a way to be able to circulate worldwide and live on the internet so that people who wanted their services could find, buy, and sell. But to keep from being caught, they would use what was called, it was like bit caching. So what they would do is, let's say you have 100 people around the globe that all have computers. And you want to have a website that somebody can pull together and look at. But you don't want anybody to get in trouble, right? Because all that stuff's trackable. Everything we have on the internet is 100% trackable by the government and by other entities, right? Everything we do. They would have little packets of data data stored on all different computers throughout the globe. And you would use a special browser called a torrent browser that would assimilate all these pieces and parts from all of these computers to create the web page that you can see. But you would have to use a torrent browser. You could use like Google or something like that. It's a special browser that would assimilate all these different pieces and parts. And that was all part of the dark web. In fact, what you see now on Google, I mean, you know that that's only like, it's less than 20% that's actually on the web. Right? I mean, it seems like a lot, but when you consider you have banks that have information on there we can't see, it's buried. You've got, you know, financial companies, you've got all kinds of databases for stores, you've got, you know, what we see like with Amazon on the front end, it's a lot of stuff, right? But at the back end, that makes Amazon all work, we don't see that, right? So it's on there somewhere, you have all these little working pieces and parts that are not actually reachable by the browsers that we have. That's it. This is a meme that floated around out there for a while. And it was like this big iceberg. And you had like the top of it says what you actually see on the internet and then what you don't see. And there's this massive structure hanging down below the water.
The iceberg.
Yeah,
The iceberg theory or whatever. it's
Yeah.
called.
yeah,
It's supposed to be anything, it's used for anything that like, there's not much surface to the thing. Use it usually for like that,
yeah,
just like show it, like what's easy to find.
Yeah.
And all the stuff that's buried underneath the
yeah, yeah.
iceberg
So
or system or something.
when I was working on my master's in interactive media, one of our assignments at that time, this was in 2010, we had to go download the torrent server and we had to go to the Silk Road and look at it and see how it worked. And I was scared to death that like FBI was gonna come knocking on my door because I was on the Silk Road. But I mean, and it's crazy, like now they, you know, I don't know that it's still up, but at that time, like the FBI cracked down a whole lot on the human trafficking stuff, because there were people that literally were killing people to harvest organs and then selling them on the black market. And it was a very bad situation, like over 100, they had a lot of deaths because of that. They would just go in and they take out their liver or a heart or whatever, ice it up and sell it to whoever was the highest bidder. It was really sick. The things people think.
Maybe FBI is searching for you after you've done like 17 movies to the hospital.
Yeah. So, and you know, and then I think about like, sometimes we'll sit down at Halloween and we'll watch like some scary horror movies and stuff. I'm thinking, who would think to do that? You know?
Pretty sure there is like 2 horror movies on the dark web. It's called like Unfriended,
Mhm.
and the other one's called like something else. There's 2
Um,
movies on it.
This is way off topic, but when I was in college, the big thing was Faces of Death. Have y'all heard of that? That was a whole series of movies, and it was really sick. They would take footage, actual honest to goodness footage of people dying, like getting killed. And they would combine them into these movies, and you would like be literally watching people dying. You know, for example, there was one thing that I saw that it was people were in like an Indy race, and one of the cars started rolling on the track, wreck, and it rolled up into the stands. And then they had all this footage of it, and you saw it slow-mo and literally killing people. I mean, it was sick. It was, yeah. And these people that did this movie, they came out with a whole slew of them. Because for some sick reason, people want to actually watch people dying, you know?
That's what that reminds me of the Final Destination movie.
Yeah, yeah.
That one movie, they're at the NASCAR race, and it like flips on top of the stands. Till we get more people, and then the stadium starts falling apart.
The only thing I remember about those movies, there was one scene and it was a logging truck.
Yeah, the logging truck, it's on the highway,
Yeah,
it's straps break, and one
Yeah.
of the line goes straight to a cop car.
yep, yep. That's the one thing I remember.
I remember the plane exploding.
So what, yeah, I don't remember. I don't hardly sit down and watch a movie very long. My attention span's like next to nothing. So I watch like 15 or 20 minutes and I have to get up and go do something else. You know? But that's the one thing I remember is the lobby track. All right, so then moving forward, you guys know what the World Wide Web is. We have server compliant or server client browsing software and scripting language. So if you were to visualize this process, right, how would you see it? If you were to sketch it out, how would you sketch out this process? Let's say we start over here with, I'm building a website. Here's my website. It's living here, right here. What would that be? Which one of these would that be?
That would be the server.
The server. And then what happens if I want to send it over to somebody out there?
That'd be fine.
Okay. And then what uses this to send it? What do I use to actually send it? How does this person get it?
This is browsing software.
Okay, your browser, right. And then what does this do?
Change the language.
Well, it creates how they experience it. So like HTML, it designates the font, it designates the color, it designates the background, it designates all these different things. Right. So if I asked you to sketch out how it works, you would be able to say server, browser, client computer, and this scripting language underneath your browser.
My house, the gas station.
Yeah.
high quality.
There you go.
Scripting language, it's in
Yeah, yeah. And it's kind of like, if you look at this, it's almost identical to like a communications cycle process. So you have a sender, you have a message, you have a receiver, you have a feedback channel, right? So it's essentially the same, very similar. Have you guys ever had issues between like Mac and PC? No. Well, a long time ago, for example, we use Adobe products, right? Like Adobe Premiere and all that. They would run great on a PC, but they had issues on Mac. Even though they were supposed to be universal, but they don't use necessarily the exact same language. Okay. So that's one thing that has been a problem previously. And then distribution of media beyond the capacity. You guys know what CDs are, right? I don't think now you can hardly buy a computer with CD-ROM anymore. Like for my laptop, I had to go out and physically buy like a little disk drive to plug into it because I've got CDs that I still pull content from. So I probably need to go ahead and put those just on a straight digital drive. And instant distribution and inexpensive media creation. So now anybody can go out and build a website on like WordPress, put it out there, costs very, very little. Right? So, and anybody in the world can see it. So these are the people we went through today. And then we talked a little bit about where we are now. And there's this thing called convergence. Y'all know what convergence is? What's it mean to converge? All the birds converged on my bird figure at one time and ate all the seeds.
Yeah.
Right, so converge means to, so convergence in media means that you have all these different types of media that are available. So if you go on the internet, years ago, it was just text mostly. So now you've got video, you've got audio, you've got graphics, you've got photography, and all the things that we used to do, or used to know, as media, like newspapers, magazines, they've all converged into digital media. So convergence is a really key word. And that's a word I stress because that's a wonderful test question. So if I said the convergence of media has pulled in multiple formats, you would know to say true. Okay, so convergence is really the key. Okay. Make sure that you know that. So factors influencing the revolution, technical breakthroughs, computers and other devices. I love Apple because I have the iCloud on here, and then I have it on my desktop at home, and then my phone hooks into it kind of sort of with iCloud, so I can pull all my photos off and everything, my phone, onto my computer without actually having to send them, which is wonderful. Digital merger of technologies and industries, development of wireless communications and mobile, expansion of creative opportunity. Okay, please go. And those are just our terms from today. So like I said, I'll put this up so you guys will have it, because some of the quiz questions will come from this, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page and have a good feel for where we were so we know where we're going. Make sense? Okay. Do you guys have any questions?
When's the quiz?
It's probably not gonna be until probably the end of the week next week. So y'all have plenty of time. Then you'll know where to go find it,
Is it, do we do it in class or do we do it like whenever?
It will be on Canvas. I'll put it on Canvas. You can do it whenever.
Oh, okay. So we can do it.
Yeah, they'll be like. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording here because this is the last of the content that I need to get up today.